Do you have any theories on why this space with rangers has been so neglected over the years? I mean, it seems like a lot of people like yourself are starting to upskill, create, um, best practices and things like that. But it seems like, these guys are just kind of out there, and then they're dealing with not only monitoring wildlife and protecting the park, but in some cases running into pretty rough and tough people as well. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like that whole space was kind of neglected.
And historically, it was. And you can look at this in terms of in Africa in general, and it's not a homogenous single country, but across the board, you've got countries with huge problems. They've got to work on healthcare, education, roads, infrastructure, policing. So in all these countries, conservation has often been the lowest priority of everything. And that just honestly is fair enough. You can't really say to a country, hey, forget about gender-based violence and forget about education. You should be putting all your money towards protecting these animals. It's a very difficult priority for them. So in terms of that, how that flows on to the conservation departments, the guys historically were often there. It was the job they could get. There wasn't very few actually joined because they have a huge love for wildlife. And honestly, why should they? Elephants, animals, buffalo will come out, eat their crops, injure their family members. There's no reason for them really to have a huge amount of love for it. They're not going on photographic safari tours. So it was a job, and traditionally it was a very low priority job. My final article from a PhD that I'm currently doing in criminology is diving into how has this evolved over time. And I think the guys in Virunga had a great observation that 20, 35 years ago, it was the average age of a ranger in that area was in his 50s. He had zero education, was often illiterate. They weren't paid well, they weren't equipped well. And the current ranger in Virunga is averaging around 28 years old. He has matriculation, often maybe one or two other diplomas that the park pays for and helps him to get. The training is extensive and extremely, extremely good. They're equipped well. So the priorities have increased. People are taking more care, but very different from previous decades.
So it's becoming a profession that people actually feel proud to be a part of and see it as a career where they can advance versus just a job that out of desperation.
That's exactly right, because up until then, you'd be a ranger in the one role, the one position for your entire career, 20 years. There was no progression, there was nowhere to advance to. And guys like the Wildlife College, who I think you'll see next, they've done amazing work in actually building in skills, courses, career progression paths where guys can promote and advance. And after years, maybe transfer across, become a guide, become a tourism manager, work in a workshop. They can do anything. So there is a huge change in that. There's more investment in the rangers themselves.
Yeah, I mean that seems extremely important, especially looking to the future where, we still don't have really enough rangers to effectively manage all the spaces we're trying to manage. And if you want people to, especially in a day and age where there's all this, you can work almost anywhere virtually, and more and more connectivity is coming to a lot of these places in Africa and other places around the world. So to have a career path that people actually want to pursue, and hopefully more and more out of passion as well, but you need to see something more than just a love for it. You need to see an ability to support a family and to feel like you're using yourself fully and grow in that way. So it's exciting to see programs like the Wildlife College. I spent quite a bit of time there following that for the film and some other projects, and even things as basic as I was kind of amazed that they're teaching things like taking care of your finances and stuff that's more just personal growth, so that people are better able to manage their lives while they're also pursuing this career.
And these are great skills. I know of a couple of parks now that have invested in building up ranger wellness, as they call it. So, in building a gym at the camp headquarters, bringing physical training instructors over to train up local instructors who can now run PT courses. I hate to joke about it, it's almost the growth of CrossFit. People are investing in that. I know of a couple of parks who've reworked their incentives programs. So they meet a particular target during the month or meet their key performance indicators. There's a certain, if you want to take a cash reward incentive, which is discouraged, but you can do that. But if you want to put it towards something else, like if you want to put it towards the purchase of a car, or school fees for your children, then the park will double that amount. So historically, again, you could see guys get their incentive, and I'm not saying this about rangers. I'm myself as well as a digger, as a grunt. So you get your cash, you blow it,
Mm-hmm.
you get on the piss, and you just have a party. And what they're trying to encourage now is ways that if you want to do that, we're not saying you shouldn't. We're not saying we're not judging on this. Like if you want to do that, hey, your life. But if you want to put it towards other things, if you want to put it towards your family and education, your children, then we will double that, and we will help build a life around you.
Yeah, it's that positive reinforcement that helps direct people.
Exactly, and there's some great advances being made there.
Mm. I mean, we've been talking about rangers already, but to you, what's the importance of rangers? And maybe even when you first got to Africa, are there any stories of meeting some of these guys and gals and just seeing how how they're sacrificing themselves out in the field to do this type of work? Is there anything that connected to you? Like, why are they important to you, I guess, essentially?
I suppose one of the first jobs I was doing around Kruger, and I had a Zulu tracker, a very short, small guy, uncharacteristically called Dumzani. And this man was an absolute machine. He's one of the most incredible trackers that he could track a fart in the wind, that's what they used to say. He was insanely good. And he had his throat cut from here to here years earlier because one of the syndicates had caught up with him in his home village.
Jeez.
He had put so many guys behind bars. And this tiny little unassuming guy and was always unarmed. He had a little stick. That was it. And we had some guys come in, a private security company, to help get all the rangers their firearms competencies and bring them into line with South African regulations. And these guys were city guys. They do cash and transit protection, and they're very tactical. Had all the right clothes and the right contractor's cap, and very, you see that type around a
Yeah.
lot. And when they saw Dimzani, they're asking, like, oh, you don't have your weapons competency? He said, no. And they were incredulous. Like, well, what the hell? How could you never have a weapons competency? And he just calmly looked at the biggest guy and says, I've never needed one. Just put him in his place instantly.
Love that kind of confidence.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess, on top of that story, eh, what would you say the importance of rangers are to these protected areas for someone that doesn't know? I mean, we've talked about this a lot on this podcast, but I always love hearing someone's perspective.
One way to put it, I'd say you have a lot of these animals represent, just think of them as a bag of gold coins, an elephant or a buffalo or a rhino in particular. You have this massive amount of wealth sitting in the middle of a park, and without any protection whatsoever, it's going to be taken. And what we're seeing over time, I can actually clarify this a bit better. The lower scale stuff, subsistence poaching, snaring some antelope or something for no one really cares about that too much. It's a danger, sure, and snares indiscriminate killers, and we sweep them out. But they generally get a slap on the wrist. If it's seen as just subsistence survival poaching, then that's not a great big concern. The concern is your high value species being taken. And those are almost every single one of them is from outsiders. It's not guys in your surrounding villages that are coming in, because it's a very specific set of skills. Access to a high-powered rifle, knowing points of aim where to shoot, being able to track at night, having the contacts to move the contraband onwards. It's a very small subset of people that have all those skills and abilities. Those are the priorities that people are trying to get. Without rangers on the ground, you've just left your house unlocked with $1 million sitting on the dinner table. It's going to go missing.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, and review our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple.